Is it okay for Christians to smoke weed?
Ooh.
Christians smoking marijuana.
Marijuana.
Is this a
Mary
thing that's
Jane.
okay? What's your experience with smoking weed, Maria?
Smoking weed, marijuana. My head immediately goes to high school.
Right.
So I went to
Back when you were a stoner, right?
Back when I was a teenager.
Hip hop. Shout out your high school. What high school did you go to?
What's up, North Hollywood High School?
Dude, if you know about if you know about North Hollywood High School, dude,
you know what? Don't hate on my public school,
I'm
you
not
little
hating.
private school boy.
First of all, did you go to public school or did you go to a magnet school for super smart people?
LAUSD from K through 12. Shout out to LAUSD.
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry,
went to
I didn't
magnet
go to Christian.
Version. You went to the you gotta
school.
have the highest IQ to get in school.
I did go to a magnet school, and that was very unique. So,
were you the prom queen?
I was not. I was a homecoming princess.
Okay,
but I was not
homecoming princess. Like
not,
literally, like personally, like seriously.
Been hanging out with our
homecoming
6-year-old too much. She talks
princess.
like that.
I thought you were prom queen. You weren't prom queen?
I was not prom queen.
Okay. All right.
You were
Oh,
incorrect.
you planned the prom.
I did plan the prom.
Yeah.
I'm a planner. So high school. I went to a magnet school, which was for highly gifted children. So the kids I went to school with were literal geniuses. Like my friends now have developed products in the Apple store.
Yep.
They run multi-million-dollar companies, lobbyists, like you name it. They're super
not
successful.
intimidating at all to date you at all. When you're clearly smarter than me.
So my friends were really smart. I don't really know how I got in.
Others.
But anyway.
Well, your school, did people at your school smoke weed?
Absolutely. Let me tell you this story. So when I think of weed, this is where my mind goes to. We were probably in 10th grade.
Okay.
Maybe. And so I've got these brainiac friends. Like we're nerds. Okay. There's no other word.
Yeah.
We're weird, socially, really smart, just nerds. So maybe not where your mind goes with like a stoner person, because these people are just so brilliant. But we had a horticulture garden at the school, and in conjunction with our English class, we would spend time in the garden.
I just want to stop right there and point out that you're already deconstructing stereotypes about people who smoke weed.
Well,
because this is smart people.
This is smart, brilliant people that 20 years later are running the world. So 3 of my friends, unbeknownst to me at the time, as we were gardening, actually planted marijuana on a public school campus.
Yes.
In the garden.
I know this story.
And you know this story because 20 years later, I recently got together with a lot of my graduating class at our house, and you were told this story.
And now by
the people that planted the marijuana.
And now they have millions of dollars coming in from all of their pharmacies.
All of their dispensaries. No, just kidding. They actually don't do anything with marijuana now, but went as far as to not just smoke it or, this is on a public school property.
Grew it at school. In class.
So the word got out eventually, right, that this was happening. So it finally made it to the administrative staff this was happening. And they obviously
Do you
got
go to
in
jail?
trouble.
What happens in the 90s? Like, what year was this?
Gosh, I graduated 01, so this is probably like 1999.
Dude, Eric, what happens? Shout out to Eric who's on the keys. Dude, do a research for me. What happens when you get caught growing weed in 1999?
On your school campus.
Yeah, what happens? Dude, I think things that happened on LAUSD campus or on a college campus, isn't that like federal property, or isn't that like something?
I'm sure.
Dude, I got in a fight one time on a college campus, and they were like threw the book at me because they're like, you can't, when it happens on a campus, our government property or whatever, it's even worse. So I would imagine that's a story for another time. that I imagine would be, your friend should be going to prison for something like this.
Yeah.
Or should be at the time. That was the criminalization of marijuana.
So they got in trouble. They got expelled.
They had to go to detention.
They weren't allowed to come to school for a minute. And it's interesting. I didn't remember all the details till recently. They were telling me the story again, or telling you for the first time.
Yeah.
But only one out of the 3 actually got taken to jail.
Okay, so 3 guys.
3 guys.
All right. First of all, what are their ethnicities?
Well, let's
what's
go to
their
the
nationalities here? Tell me
we
about this. This is the 90s.
one Jewish boy, so he was white.
Okay.
We had a Korean boy. He was Korean. And then we had a black kid. And
I think I know what happened.
You know, what's crazy is what happened, and our system is definitely very, very, very far from perfect. And
especially then.
My friend that's black is the only one that got taken in handcuffs, put in a police car, and taken to jail, while the other 2 got away with it with very, very little repercussions.
What is this podcast about today? Because I really want to talk about systemic injustice, racial injustice, but we'll just do that.
That might be a different. That's a different
if you
episode.
You want that? Put that in there. But Eric, what happens in the 90s when you get caught growing weed at school?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. Turns out that less than 50 plants was a felony, of course, imprisonment up to 5 years and a $250,000 fine. And
wow.
And much of that has not changed to this day. That's at the federal level.
So. Okay, at the federal level. But I was reading this week that, that federal level, there has been a decriminalization of some level recently. Right, Eric? Do you have stats on that?
I do. And it turns out it's just at the House level right now. And of course, needs to go to Senate, which the story goes, or what has been told lately as of yet in the news, is that it's going to die at the Senate level.
Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
But there may be a decriminalization for marijuana, or is that all drugs?
That's just marijuana.
Okay. So basically the conversation could get into this. Mm-hmm. Should Christians smoke weed? We get into what's legal and what's not legal. Because that's always been, and then the conversation could go to, man, if someone, gets arrested for a DUI, which, comparatively, alcohol and weed are there's a lot of similarities. They're both organic substances. Right. They're both habit forming potentially. They're both used for recreation, or they both require moderation on some level, right? Yep. So you could get into a conversation of, dude, how, because when I was a kid, we used to wear these shirts that said DARE.
Yeah.
Right?
We used to have assemblies where we would go through a couple assemblies, and then at the end we all got that shirt, which was,
dude, drugs were like the biggest fear of like my parents ever. Yeah. So like I wonder,
what did your parents, sorry to interrupt, but tell us what your parents did if you didn't do drugs. Like, there was a whole journey that if you got to,
oh my gosh,
you went through high school.
Yeah, they're like,
right?
We'll get you a car if you don't do drugs.
Right.
And they said we're going to do a lie detector test though, to make sure. My parents were like, we will get you a car. Here's X number of value if you graduate from without having done drugs, right? Because this is Ronald Reagan era, right? Yeah. Which Nancy Reagan, the whole thing. Eric, I would love to know how the DARE program worked out, because that was like, we're going hard on drugs. Like, we're locking fools up for, like, they're doing serious time. Like, back to your story, it seems like your friends should have done serious time. Now, the thing is, now we look at, was that too hard on a generation? Did that even work?
Right.
Should people who smoking a little weed, should they be going to prison for this, So anyways, I remember I was at a skate park. I was in 9th grade, and I was hanging out with my friend who was definitely a drug user, okay? And I remember we would go to his house, and every single clock, whether it was analog or whether it was electronic, he had 420 set to every single clock. You look at me like you don't know what 420 is.
No, I know what 420 is. I'm just thinking, how do you do that on an analog clock?
You put the 4 and the 20. And
like one of those.
Is that what it's called, an analog clock?
Sure.
Old school clock.
Yeah. I was thinking of the one with the red dots that like made the numbers.
All those clocks said 420. Like, this dude was all about 420. Like, this guy at school was one of my closest friends. This school, by the way, he's the guy who I got in a fight with.
Oh, nice.
That I told
Your
about
Christian private school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it was a private school, not everybody's Christian. So, they would make pipes out of apples. They were smoking weed on the school campus. So just like your school, people were smoking weed. My school, people were smoking weed. Anyways, I don't know where I was going with the story. I was hanging out with him, and my mom had dropped me off at a skate park, and we were sitting there, and there used to be these things back in the day where you'd put these things on your tongue, like these little like breath fresheners. I don't know if you remember those.
Oh yeah, those like breath strips.
Yeah, and you would drop them on your tongue.
They're like Listerine little
And me and him were sitting at a skate park, and like he hands me one of those, and I do that, and my mom saw me take that thing out of his hand. Have I told you this story before?
No, but I just laughed because your mom used to follow you everywhere.
Yeah.
Awesome.
She's
a great mom.
Let's not throw my mom under the bus right now. Okay,
She's
but we should
best.
talk about my mom using CBD oil. We should talk about that in a minute. Okay, so remind me of that if I forget. So my mom pulls the car up like, bad boys, what you gonna do? Like pulls up onto the sidewalk and comes over and grabs me. He's like, what did you just put in your mouth? I'm like, Mom, it's like minty fresh like drops. I'm not like dropping acid at the skate park. Anyways, all that to say is like drugs were like a huge deal back then. And I just wonder, Eric, give us this. What is the, how harmful is it for kids to smoke weed? Like, what does that do to their brain? That might be something that we should talk about, because if we're talking about if it's right or not, we should also talk about kids. Because I have a friend who's a pretty successful drug dealer. His name is, just kidding, I'm not going to say his name, but we've been friends since high school. And I actually said, did you want to, anyways, he was talking to me about, he gave me some advice. This is probably like, when did I preach on this subject?
A couple years ago.
I talked about this subject at our church when it was becoming legal. And, he told me, he goes, listen, as much as I'm an advocate for the legalization of marijuana, he goes, I still wouldn't let my kids smoke weed, into a certain age, because there's a development thing that happens in your brain. And I would be interested to know, someone can probably put this in the comments, like, what that does to your brain. But anyways, let's get back on track.
Right. No, that's an important conversation. I think the criminalization of marijuana, there obviously, just like alcohol, is an age limit, not limit, but yes, age limit. You can't drink alcohol before you're 21. I don't know. Do you, what the age is for marijuana? Because it is legal now in California. I don't know if it's 18 or 21.
Air Bear, do you got an answer for us on that one?
Yeah, so I wanted to just come back to, you originally said that what are the effects on kids, right? And then, the biggest one is difficulty thinking and problem solving. So there's a reduction in just kind of cognitive or cognition, I guess you might call it, problems with memory and learning. I think that's like the number one, right? Like they always said, if you smoke weed, you're going to lose like your memory. I remember hearing that a lot.
Your brain cells are gonna die.
Yeah,
that's right.
Killing your brain. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Yes! You remember those commercials? And they would have like an egg and like, this is your brain, and then they would like fry it in a frying pan. I don't know who paid for those commercials, but I'm still thinking about those today.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's good. So hey, we want to lead these conversations toward what do we have any examples of Jesus smoking weed? Do we have anything in the scriptures about Jesus getting high? Right? Come on, say it with me. Ain't no high like the Most High. Justice, don't make these jokes. All right.
You got jokes, babe.
Yeah. We do have stories about Jesus drinking alcohol. Right? And though wine at the time of Jesus' day, some would argue, was more diluted and all that kind of stuff, we do have religious leaders uncomfortable with the fact that he eats and drinks with sinners. In fact, his first miracle in the Bible, John chapter 2, wedding at Cana, comes out the gate. His mom comes to him. We've got 180 gallons of, that's how much.
That's a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, 180 gallons of water that were in these ceremonial pots. And Jesus says, okay, Mom, I'll solve your problem. Just a little context. For some reason, Jesus' mom was in charge of this wedding banquet, and for, there not to be enough alcohol to run out of alcohol at a wedding banquet. These banquets would last like a week at a time. Tell me if I'm getting too nerdy on this, but you run out of alcohol, party's over. And so for his mom to come to him, it's like, son, I need you to do something about this, because it's going to make me look bad that I don't have enough alcohol for this party. Does that make sense?
Right.
So he basically does a favor to his mom. That's his first miracle. Looking out for, shout out to Mama's boys in the house. He's like, you know what, Mom? I got this, First of all, he's like, Mom, it's not my time. Like, this isn't the first miracle I want to do.
This isn't what I want to do, Mom.
But she's like, but just do it anyways. So he goes to the servants and he says, here are all these stone water jars. Fill them with water to the brim and watch what happens. They do that. They obey Jesus. Bam. The master of ceremonies gets the first drink. And what's he say?
Best wine I've ever had.
Best alcohol I've ever tasted.
Yep.
He says this, usually they bring out the good alcohol at the beginning of the party. Then at the end of the party, they bring out the worst alcohol.
Because everyone's drunk
already. The watered down alcohol.
Right.
when everyone's had too much to drink. This is literally in the Bible. He goes, whoever brought this wine, this is the best wine I've ever tasted. It's like a showstopper. Like, it's like, ding, 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 ding. Can we talk about this wine? Like, everybody load up, right? So Jesus literally did a miracle to keep a party going and provided more alcohol for everybody. And so you got to be careful, because there are conservative perspectives out there that Christians shouldn't drink alcohol and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, listen, you got to put this in context here. That like the references in the Bible to alcohol are about it being a blessing from the Lord more than it's about being, a hindrance or something that would keep you from the Lord. It says in Ephesians chapter, I think it's 5, it says that, that don't be foolish, don't get drunk on wine, right? But it says be drunk, be full of the Holy Spirit, right? Don't be foolish, don't be drunk on wine. Here's the thing: Jesus may have turned a bunch of water into wine, but nobody ever carried Jesus out of a party for drinking too much either.
Right.
You know what I mean? So he knew that moderation. And I wonder if that's where this conversation should go too,